Hello everyone. So for this time, I will be discussing to you or explaining to you the 3 topics for our second quarter. So we have the Forex, we have the oil price increase or oil price rollback, and also the migration. But first, let's have this article entitled Sabal, Understanding the Exchange Rate. So this article refers to the first topic, which is the Forex or the foreign exchange market. So let me read first the article. The value of the Philippine peso to US dollar reached at 54.10 pesos this month. In recent memory, the highest value of the Philippine peso to US dollar was recorded on October 2004 at 56.34 pesos, while the lowest was in May 1999 at 37.84. Now, let me remind you that this article was published last year. This is not the latest, but it was published last year. So what does it mean when we say the highest value of Philippine peso to US dollar was recorded on October 2004 at 56.34, and the lowest was on May 1999. So first, there are 2 types of exchange rate system, and we know as the fixed and flexible exchange rate system and the floating exchange rate system. There are other terms that was used to refer fixed and flexible exchange rate system, known as the peg exchange rate system. So, what are the difference between the fixed or peg exchange rate and the floating exchange rate? So here, under a fixed regime or the fixed exchange rate, a country's exchange rate does not fluctuate. When we say fluctuate, it would be quickly go down or quickly rise the value. So against a base currency over a period of time. So when we say base currency, the base currency all over the world is known as the dollar, but there are instances that we also use the rich countries or the developed countries in having the base currency. For example, having the EU or the European Union, which has the euro. So again, European Union are powerful countries in the international market, so also they can be used as the base currency. So the key reason to this is because government intervenes to determine the exchange rate value. So when we say fixed regime, it is controlled, it is under the supervision and implementation of the government as well as the central bank. So when we say fixed regime, government and central bank. So the other policy is the floating exchange rate, where the determination of the value is market driven, meaning the exchange rate value is influenced by the demand and supply of foreign exchange, not by some level of government intervention. So when we say floating exchange rate, the control is based on the supply and demand of the foreign currency. So if there is a high demand for dollar or high demand for pesos, then that would be according to the demand or the law of demand and supply of the foreign exchange or the foreign currency, which is under the market driven or controlled or supervised by the market. So for instance, we have here the types or the topics under fixed or peg rate system. So when we say peg or fixed, it is government. For instance, the Philippine peso to US dollar increased from 45 to 50. Under a fixed exchange rate, it is called devaluation, where its opposite is revaluation. When we say devaluation, it is the term by the government or the central bank where the value of our money or our domestic currency is devalued. When we say devalued, the worth or the value of our currency is low compared to the base currency, which is dollar. So as we have here 45 to 50, so there is a ratio of 50 over 1. What do we mean by this? 50 over 1, where 50 refers to pesos and 1 refers to US dollar. So that is devaluation. And the opposite of it is revaluation. So what if from 50 it goes down to 40? So that means revaluation, because it could be 40 is to 1. So the value of peso increase because we pay much less rather than having the 50 over 1. So if we compare 50 over 1 and 40 is to 1, which is more advantageous, we have the 40 over 1. So devaluation means a decrease in the country's official exchange, and the last one is the revaluation. So however, under a floating regime, the increase is called appreciation. When we say floating regime, it is controlled or supervised by the market, international market, known as the foreign exchange market. So what is appreciation? It has the same meaning or similar description of revaluation. However, the difference is appreciation, market; revaluation, government or central bank. So what is the opposite of appreciation? We have here the depreciation, or the other term for devaluation. They also have similar description or meaning. So depreciation is the fall in the price of a nation's currency. So what is our example here? In the September data, there is a peso depreciation. So meaning the pesos that we are paying against dollar has risen or has increased. So that means we are paying more rather than obtaining the dollar. So is this advantageous or is it beneficial for our country or economy? So here, we need to have at least 54 pesos in the September data. So this September data was last year. This clearly hurts the import sector. Why? Because when we say import sector, we are buying the goods of the foreign countries. So because we are paying more pesos rather than obtaining the dollar, because the prices of these imported products are based on the foreign currencies. But however, it could also be beneficial to the export-oriented industries. Why? Because products that we purchase in the United States will become a bit expensive when sold in the Philippines. Would it be beneficial for the export-oriented industries? Because since it really hurts the import sector, we would decrease our import sector, but we would be intensifying or magnifying our export-oriented industries. So since we are declining our demand for import sector, we would be increasing our export-oriented industries. Because when the foreign countries purchase our products, it could be cheaper or affordable by them. So because of that, there would be a lot of demands for our products. So we could be a country which is competitive in the international market or international trading. So that is the foreign exchange market. Again, there are two types of exchange rate system: the fixed and the floating. The other term for fixed, aside from flexible, is peg exchange rate. When we say fixed, it is government or central bank, while floating exchange is controlled by the international market or the foreign exchange market. And it also has the different values of increasing or decreasing the values based on the domestic currency and the base currency. So our next topic will be about the oil price fluctuation. So we have here, when we say fluctuation, it depends if it would increase or it would decrease. So let me read first the article. Oil price refers to the spot price of 1 barrel of the benchmark crude oil. The price depends upon its grade, location, and the content of sulfur present in it. The price of oil can be determined with the help of balance between its demand and supply. Now, in identifying the expected prices of oil would be determined by its demand and supply. Later, I will discuss why. So oil storage trade is a strategy in which oil is purchased by the large oil companies when the prices are low for instant storage and delivery. So now, in having the oil price fluctuation, remember that there are two types of oil price fluctuation. Aside from being termed or called as oil price increase or oil price decrease, there is also two terms referred as rollback and hike. So what is the similarity of oil price decrease to oil price rollback and the oil price increase, or which is the oil price hike? So now, in identifying also the prices of oil, it would be need to identified by its grade or the quality of oil based on the location. So where do we get mostly of our oil reserve in the earth? We have in the Middle Eastern countries. Most of our oil reserves are produced and extracted from the Middle Eastern countries, which is part of Asia. So now, as you can see here in the picture, this is a dredging equipment or dredging machine. What is the purpose of this dredging machine? It needs to extract, it needs to get the oil underground or beneath in the earth. So this is not a simple or ordinary process in acquiring or getting our natural resources such as oil or petroleum. It needs sophisticated materials. When we say the materials or equipment needs to be appropriate or suitable for dredging. So oil companies need these types of equipment for extracting oil or when we say petroleum, kerosene, diesel. So these are part of oil. When we say oil, these are not vegetable oil, these are not palm oil. These oils are the non-renewable resources of our nature, which means when we utilize this type of natural resources, it doesn't reproduce by having 2 weeks, by having a year. It doesn't go like that, because when we produce or when the nature produces this oil, it takes millions of years to produce these fossil fuels. Now, the oil companies, we have the Shell, we have the Phoenix, we have the Caltex, so on and so forth. There are many types of oil companies or large oil companies that are centered or owned most especially by the Middle Eastern countries. So they need to have oil storage trade also for having oil reserve, because there would be times or there would be instances that the global market for oil will have shortage or will have the problem in supplying the oil. So these large oil companies then keep the oil stored till the prices rise. Why would they do that? Because when the price rises, these oil companies will gain more profit. Again, when the price rises, these oil companies will gain more profit. Why? Because when the supply decreases, the demand increases. So what if there are many drivers, there are many chopper. So for example, chopper in the Philippines, or jeepney drivers or taxi drivers need the supply of oil. However, there is a shortage of the oil. So there is a great demand for oil. What would happen to the price? It would increase the price. So the price of oil goes up and vice versa. So oil supply depends on tax, legal framework, geological discovery, political situation of oil producing companies, and the cost of extracting the oil. So the oil demand depends on the macroeconomic condition of the globe. Now, why would it be referred as the macroeconomic condition of the globe? It is because oil is a need or a global need for everyone, because it does not just run our automobiles or have our motors or our transportation, but also it produces electricity, it produces energy. So that is why it refers to a macroeconomic condition of the globe. So that is the oil price fluctuation. Again, there are two types, which is the oil price, which means when we say oil price hike, it goes up, or oil price increase. When we say oil price rollback, the prices of oil will go down or will decrease. Now, aside from the oil price fluctuation, we also have the migration of Filipino workers. But that doesn't mean that only Filipinos are the only race or nationality that goes for migration. There are also a lot of races, there are also a lot of nationalities that have this migration. So in the Philippines, a deeply rooted and pervasive culture of migration has made moving abroad common, acceptable, even desirable as an option or strategy for a better life. So again, we have this termed as the brain drain. When we say brain drain, our competitive workers, our skillful or talented workers are being pushed and being pressured by the economy that we have in the Philippines. So that is why they choose the opportunity in abroad or in the overseas place or overseas land. So for decades, sizable numbers of Filipinos have left home in search for permanent settlement or temporary work overseas. Trends long attributed to the fragile economy and exacerbated by frequent natural disasters. So again, Philippines is part of the Pacific Ring of Fire. And what do we mean by this? We are prone to typhoons, we are prone to earthquakes, we are prone to volcanic eruptions. So because of these natural disasters, many Filipinos are forced to have a better life abroad. Today, more than 10 million Filipinos, or about 10% of the population, are working and or living abroad. While a markedly improved economic situation in recent years has not diminished the outflows. By this massive movement of Filipinos working abroad or living abroad, we came to the long-term development planning, which is the reintegration of OFWs. When we say OFWs, the Overseas Filipino Workers, our modern hero. So when the Philippines launched an overseas employment program in 1970s, the thrust was finding labor markets. The state not only promoted Filipino workers to the oil-rich but labor-short Gulf Cooperation Council or the GCC countries, it also sold these uncharted Middle Eastern destinations to Filipinos. So, what is happening here? During the launch of employment program in the 1970s, there are also massive movement in the Middle Eastern countries. Filipinos are working, Filipinos are living in the Middle Eastern countries. For example, Saudi Arabia, we have the Lebanon, we have the Oman, we have the Bahrain, we have the UAE or the United Arab Emirates. So by the latter half of the 1970s, as deployment and competition with other origin countries increased, so we're facing labor migration problems, including poor working condition and abuse by employers, prompted the government to address migrant welfare and protection. Now, aside from having the advantages or the benefits from having a better life living or working abroad, there are also bane or there are negative impacts brought by migration, because there are poor working conditions. Aside from, there are many we say the environment is not suitable for our condition, because we are prone to having the tropical climate. While having worked in the Middle Eastern countries, we can say that the climate is very extreme. When we say extreme, it is very hot. And there are also abuses implemented or executed by the employers. There are physical harassment, there are sexual harassment, and even no salaries or even no communication for their families in the Philippines. So that is why we have the POEA for the protection of our OFWs. And we have two types of migration. So migration is not just about movement of people from a country to another country. So when we say a movement of people from country to country, this is called international migration. But when we say movement from provinces to provinces in the same country, we call that the regional migration, because it is only done inside a country. For example, we have here, we move from northern Mindanao to the Cagayan Valley region, or from Visayas region, we move to Luzon. So this is just a regional migration. But when we say international migration, for example, having from Philippines to United States of America, from Philippines to Australia, so that is international migration. And this ends our discussion about the Forex, oil price fluctuation, and the migration.